As mentioned, I'm Marcin. I'm a senior mobile developer at Monterey, and today I wanted to explain why your app needs accessibility features and how to implement them in Flutter. So to deliver on this topic, I would first go through the business incentive behind making accessibility your first priority when it comes to building applications. Then we will come to the technical part when we will be discovering common problems in applications regarding these four areas of accessibility. And obviously, I will prepare some. I prepared some solutions to those problems. Those will be in Flutter, obviously, but the problems themselves are platform agnostic. So even if you are not a Flutter developer, you should be able to find a value in this presentation. And then in the end, I will put the responsibility on you, basically, to care more about accessibility in your apps. But first, I will equip you with proper arguments for the business side, and then with the proper knowledge from the developer side. So let's dive into the cost of ignoring accessibility. It's pretty significant. We often tend to think about accessibility as a more of a afterthought when we already created an app. The features are there, and only then we are considering maybe as a last effort for this version of the application at least, let's add some accessibility features. And this is very bad, but I have some numbers to prove that. So let's run some numbers. About 25 billion pounds a year are paid for online services and products by people with disabilities. So it's quite a lot, but it's not all for you. Obviously, right away, 69% of respondents that collectively declared that 25 billion was spent by them declared that they will avoid the service in the future if it wasn't accessible enough. So not only those businesses lost this one conversion, but also conversions in the future, which we can't really measure accurately. Which leaves us with about 17 billion, simple math, potentially going away from businesses that didn't care enough about accessibility. And these numbers are a year. Actually, to give you some more context, the 17 billion isn't that exact number, obviously, because this is from the percentage of this 25 billion. And by doing that, we assumed basically that every respondent spent the same amount of money a year, which is probably not true. But this is mostly an indicator that we are talking about tens of billions of pounds a year. So I guess your business will really like to have this money rather than your competition. So some context, this was just about the web. So I haven't found any information about mobile, but for mobile it will be probably, I mean, if you add mobile to that, it will probably be even more. It was just UK, that's why we are speaking about pounds. So imagine how it scales to for Europe or maybe other markets that we are targeting. It's a lot of money. And it was just in 2019. I mean, the data comes from the survey that was, the surveyed people answered that in 2019. A lot economically has changed since then, so I'm not really sure how the number looks like right now. There's no more fresh data to this, but it's still probably a significant amount. And why because as you can see, the money is there, why we are thinking that there's accessibility is not something important for us when we are building apps. And I think this is because we believe in a few falsehoods, and I want to go through them, at least the major ones. So the first one, the falsehood, is that disabilities are only visible, and this is far from being the truth. Actually, most disabilities are invisible. For example, you can't see that someone has a color vision deficiency because you have to ask them, and this is not a conversation that you have with people. So, yeah, and by that, our brains cannot group people. This is how our brains basically work, that if we see something commonly enough, then we are assigning some weight to the group of people. And since we are not seeing the disabilities right off the bat, that makes us believe in the first falsehood. And the second one is that disabilities are only permanent, and this is also not true. The disabilities can be temporal too. So if you break your arm, until it heals, you are in the same position as people that cannot use their hand for the rest of their lives. And also, disabilities can be even situational. So if you are carrying your luggage and sprinting through the airport, you have just one hand to operate your device with, and this is the same situation as you would as the other two example users are. And also, the final falsehood is that, given all of the before ones, that disabilities are uncommon, and disabilities are more common than you may think. I have some data to prove that too. So World Health Organization says, they give us the report that indicates that 15% of world population experience a disability, which leaves us with well enough 1 billion potential users that will take benefits from our accessibility considerations given in our application. Sorry. So Flutter provides great accessibility support right off the box, but it cannot do everything for you. So that's why we need you as developers to take care about that on your own. And we'll be going through what Flutter does for us automatically and in which areas we have to help this toolkit. So to the technical part, what an accessible app actually is. We often consider contrast ratios, font being big enough to be easily readable. Sometimes we are considering color palettes to be adjusted for different color vision efficiency, but this is only a tip of the iceberg. Actually, it's so much more that we'll be covering only basics today. Accessibility is a broad topic that is split into these 4 major groups. And solutions to problems that I will present you are as effortless as I could imagine. So you can start implementing them even without explicit confirmation from the business side that you can do that. Basically, you can implement that on your own as a part of normal development of features. So first, touch. Regarding touch, we have to make sure that our app is usable with one hand, and this is both right and left hand, because we tend to forget about left-handed people. We have to provide alternatives for gesture-based interactions, especially multi-pointer ones. And we have to support keyboard and mouse. And by support keyboard, I don't mean that you should support special key bindings. All you have to do is to make focus nodes available for Flutter, so Flutter can do that automatically for you. But we can actually build interfaces that are not by default supporting that, so we'll be taking care of this. Our first contender here is page view. Page view, as you may know, allows us to scroll through pages, right and left, or top to bottom, but by default it's horizontal. And this is really nice, but as you can see, it's gesture-based by default. And users might be using a mouse, keyboard, or a pen, or any other input device that supports only one pointer. So it's crucial to have alternative one-click interaction methods to gesture-based ones. This is how we implement page view in a not easiest way, but to be fair, for our fix, this is how you implement that. That's what you saw basically previously. As you can see, it's really easy, but there are problems, sadly, to this implementation. Mainly, there's no keyboard or mouse support because you don't have anything to click on, and you don't have a focus node, so you can't use keyboard to navigate to a specific button and then do that action, because there's no focus. I mean, you can focus on the page view, but it won't react to your keyboard inputs. And there's also no indication how to proceed. I presented that you can swipe through, And I told you that this is a page view, but users might not have a clue that this is the case because there's no indicator that you can switch pages. So how to fix that? Our goal would be to obviously add keyboard and mouse support and indicate the interactions. In our case, it would be forward and backward interaction. This is how we do that. As you can see, I don't have a laser pointer, so I will lose my finger. Page view builder stays as it was, so nothing changed, but it was just put on the bottom of the stack. And at the top, we are putting icon button. And this is something that we have to consider too. So by default, Flutter will read whatever content is in the button and then say to the user that this is the button if the user is using screen reader. But obviously, it cannot do that for icon buttons because icon is not something that you can read. So provide, every time you are using icon button, provide also a tooltip. So screen reader has something to present to the user with some context about the button. And also this tooltip will be presented in a graphical way too. So if the user gets confused, it can get the information what the button does. And this is how the fixed version looks like. So we just have two buttons. I implemented on the listing only one, just to not litter the listing with lines of code that are not necessary. And the improvement made here is that we have the keyboard and mouse support, because as you can see, we can click. So we have the mouse support, but also we can use focus nodes because each button is focusable. So you can focus whatever action you want to perform and then use your keyboard to do that action. And also there's an indication of actions that you can do. So there's indication how to proceed. Nice, that one is fixed. So next one, multipoint and gestures. Often when you see scrolling feature, it's using pinch to zoom gesture. Sometimes it's using the double swipe, but this is still 2 pointers for the interaction. And users might be able only to use one hand to operate the device at a given time. This is how we implement that in Flutter. So by default, you can scroll, you can zoom in and out any widget that you would like. In our case, this is an image. But the problem is that Interactive Viewer by default only supports multi-pointer gestures. So the problem is obviously that multi-pointer gestures are not easily achievable with one hand. You can try that right now. Just take out your phone and try to zoom with one hand. Depending on the phone you have, it might be even impossible. So we have to fix that somehow. And goal here would be to add double tap support gesture to support double tap gesture for zooming in addition to the default pinch one, because we don't want to get rid of features that we have, but we have to make alternatives that are more accessible. And yeah, so just replace Interactive Viewer with this widget. The problem is that it's not included in the default Flutter library. So, and I promised you effortless examples. This is actually the code that is necessary for that. So this is not effortless as you may think. But you can head over to this link. I promise this is effortless. Just copy this code, place it somewhere safe in your project, and then replace every interactive viewer that you have with this one. And double tap support is already discussed and planned for the interactive viewer that is included in Flutter, but there's no timeline, so until then you can use this. Improvements made here. Zooming is now easily achievable with one hand and even one pointer, because users also can now use a mouse to double click. And by default for mouse, zooming is done with scroll wheel, which is, I guess, okay, but double tap is something nice to have too. And some real-life scenarios regarding those fixes that we implemented. This one we already talked about. So travelers carrying luggage, trying to access their travel plan. One hand is, is busy with something, and the other can do interactions, but it's only one hand. And imagine that your application that show the, for example, map of an airport used interactive viewer, and the user now have to stop and do the interaction. This is not convenient. In the second situation, parents carrying a toddler with fever while trying to find the right dosage of medicine. Imagine that you are responsible for the app that provides such information, but you decided to use page view, and the user is probably it's the first time that the user uses your app. User is stressed, very stressed. So without the proper indicators, users might not be able to comprehend that pages can be switched, basically. So first two examples were the convenience ones, basically, but the last one is the necessity one. So without our fixes, those example users would not be able to go through our flows. And imagine users accessing your app with a touchpad or on a desktop machine using whatever technology they would like. They have one pointer, then they maybe have some clunky way to perform multi-pointer ones, but this is not something convenient. So yeah, we should fix that. Nice, that's done for touch. Now to the vision. This is our standard consideration, so color palette should be prepared for different kinds of color vision deficiencies. We should make our app screen reader friendly, which we did with the tooltips before. It should offer sufficient contrast, which is something that the designer should take care of. But the last one is something that you should consider, and this is often not done properly in apps. So your layout should be ready for external font scaling settings. You may not know that, but users are able to scale text in your app via system settings, and this is not something that you opt in. This is something by default. So 200% is the recommended value to test against, but iOS will let users zoom even for 310%, which is a significant amount. And often common mistakes happen with this. The developers are restricting the widgets with a fixed sized parents for some reason, because maybe they saw in a designer program that this text fits in a box of this size, and they translate it to the app. But this is not. This obviously doesn't consider scaling. Yeah. So first one, the size box is an obvious one. So we restricted height to 40 and width to the screen size, the screen width. So this is obviously not going to work when you scale text. But then you may think that flexible widget or expanded or something like that will help you. And I mean, as name suggests, flexible adjusts itself based on the size of the children, which is nice, but it won't extend the parent, So it may work for some examples, but for bigger font scales, it will still run out of space, and then the text will be cut. So you have to also consider that. That the flexible is not a solution, basically. And our goal here would be to obviously make the text content readable in whole, regardless of applied text scaling. You can do that really easily. Just get rid of those restricting widgets, put everything in a column, and then the column into single child scroll view, for example. So whenever the text and the content will not fit one screen, you can scroll through that. And this is nice because this proves efficient. This proves useful for any scaling that you can apply here, because you have an endless space vertically, basically. But the nice thing that Flutter does for us automatically is that if the content will fit within one screen, if no scrolling is necessary, then no scroll bars, no overshoot animations will be presented to the user. So it looks like a regular widget, basically. Nice. That one is fixed too. Now, real-time scenarios regarding these fixes. Commuter trying to order food while being on the bus on a sunny day. This is regarding text sizes and text contrast. So you might be not able to see perfectly your screen, and contrast can help you with that. Imagine a conference attendee trying to find next conference room by the color assigned to a specific topic when wearing red tinted glasses. I mean, we all, probably most of us, are wearing sunglasses, and this way we are restricting the amount of light or certain colors into getting into our eyes. So apps should be considering that So we are not only dependent on colors, probably, for indicating some differences in groups, in elements on the screen. And also, as before, first two are a convenience-wise. Users can still get out of their way and somehow, get through those accessibility issues. But the last one is the necessity one. So visually impaired person trying to create an account in your service. This is something that they can't do without you providing those fixes, because, for example, they will apply the font scaling, and your layout is not ready for that. And, for example, sign button will be dropped besides the screen, and then they don't have the button to click to sign up, basically. This is what we should consider. Now, hearing. So every audio cue that you can provide to the users should also come with a additional haptic cue. So we are not only dependent on audio. When we want our users' attention. And also, every spoken content should be presented with subtitles or at least transcript. So if you can hear something, then you can read that. And adding haptic feedback is really easy in Flutter. There's the haptic feedback class that provides you with several levels of impact. The nice thing about that is that it automatically respects user settings regarding haptics. So if the user disable haptic system-wide, you don't have to worry to bother the user with unnecessary vibrations, because this will be taken care of automatically for you. And I don't mean by presenting you this that you should now litter your code with this additional line. You can just use higher order function and provide that to your proper handlers that you have. So it is as effortless as you can imagine, basically. Now, next one, regarding subtitles, you can use a package. This is not built in, but a community taken care of this issue, or alternative one, but I believe this is the most popular one. And also, this is a very robust solution, because all you have to do is to provide a link on the internet for the subtitles, and this package will automatically download those assets for you. And you may think, okay, this is fine, but first I have to have those subtitles, right? I mean, depending on the length of the video, probably this is true, but it would be really easy for you as a developer if the video is not that long and you speak the language that is spoken in this video. You can do that by yourself. Even in text, you don't have to use any special software. This is how you do that. This is an example file of WebVTT format. As you can see, it's that simple. So it first introduces itself. So we are sure we are dealing with WebVTT. Then we have indexed blocks of content. Each block has a time frame that the content should be displayed in, and then the content itself. There's a bit of formatting there, but you don't have to worry about that. Content itself will be added by you, will make your application infinitely more accessible, even if it's not the prettiest. So yeah, you can do that by your own. And real-time scenarios regarding those issues. Imagine a bar customer trying to understand how the app can get them a free drink when in the middle of the load party. Obviously, they can't hear your promotional video, so they really much appreciate the text in this situation. And the necessity example is a user playing your game after losing hearing. So obviously they can't hear audio cues for something that is happening off the screen, so haptics would be nice. And also any dialogues should be presented with subtitles so they can understand what is happening on the screen. And last one group of accessibility considerations is speech. And this is so uncommon in apps and so unique to the apps that are using that I don't have any specific examples. But as a rule, every speech-controlled feature should have its text or button control alternative. So by text control alternative, I mean that if the device is listening for the commands, it should also provide an option to type in the command in a natural language, because this is basically what speech does. So just make that also available. And button control alternative, this is for actions that are probably, because if you are using speech to control something, your app is very feature rich, so it's hard to comprehend what features even there are in the application. So provide somewhere in the nested submenus an option also not to the option to do even more obscure features in the application. Don't restrict yourself with the speech controlled ones. Real-time scenarios here. Driver trying to give voice commands with high level of white noise generated by the air resistance. You are breezing through the highway, it's loud inside, you are yelling at your navigation, please add stop at the nearest restaurant, and it cannot comprehend you, so it would be nice to have a button that says add stop, nearest restaurant, something like that. I don't have any specific examples, but this is just to visualize that. The other example, user with heavy accent trying to voice input as an input method. This is notorious for voice assistance. The problem here is that both user and the device speak the same language, just the device cannot comprehend the accent because it was not programmed for that. So provide the user with text field, so the user can then type in the command rather than speaking. And that way it will be accessible. And the last example, the necessity one, though about the second one you may argue. The third one is a person with hearing impairment trying to access speech-controlled feature in your app. No matter how the environment is favorable for them, they will not be able to speak to your device, so you have to provide alternatives for them so they can use the feature. And the list goes on. This is basically when I put that responsibility on you. I hope that you already have some maybe ideas how to improve your application, or you will be considering those example issues when implementing new features in your apps. And in the end, technology was created to help people, not create new challenges. So please, as developers, do not be responsible for creating challenges for people. And leaving you with that, thank you in advance for considering accessibility in your apps. And if you have any questions, then go ahead now. Thank you.